And welcome everybody to episode 16 of Conversations with Craigle. This is my part 2 of my interview with Lucas Petersen. If you haven't listened to part 1, I highly recommend you go back and do that. Stop this recording and go back an episode and listen through. It's an hour long, part 1 is, and this one clocks in probably about an hour also. But there's a lot of good context that you will miss if you listen to this one and this part 2 first. So if you haven't listened to part 1 already, go ahead and stop this and go back, listen to part 1, and then this will make even more sense as our conversation continues at this point. And while there's a lot of information that you can get just from this, it will make a lot more sense if you listen to part 1. So in this episode, we continue our conversation talking about how Lucas got into fire service, how he got into doing wildfire or wilderness firefighting, and kind of his journey to becoming a Helena Hotshot, which he actually begins the season here. It is April 16. He actually begins on April 22nd, so just a few days after this episode is released. Really had a great time talking with him. We also talked about ultrarunning, how he found it, the exciting parts of that for him. We also talk about some life advice that he would give to a younger self or a younger person knowing what he knows now. Again, really a pleasure to talk with Lucas, to learn so much good information about him, and I hope you enjoy this conversation with him. Again, part 2 with Lucas Petersen. Enjoy, everybody, and I will talk to you on the other side.
Around that time, when COVID hit, I was like, man, I don't know if this is for me. I was kind of discouraged how it was handled at the education level, on a state level. I felt like a lot of these kids were not getting what they should have been getting out of their schooling, which, we can go back and we have our own opinions about everything, but It just was discouraging for me as somebody who's passionate about helping others, seeing certain people who needed help not get the help that they need.
Right.
So around that time, one of my friends that I went to college with, he played offensive line at Central. He at this point had lost 100 pounds and was working for the Eniat Hotshots for the Forest Service out in Eniat, Washington, out near Wenatchee, Lake Chelan area. So when COVID hit, everything got shut down. I was like, man, I don't know if this is what I want to do. So the idea of getting into firefighting kind of popped up out of nowhere. I don't know how I thought of it. At the time, I was thinking of structured firefighting. So what Matt Lovelady does, working for Bellingham or Seattle Fire Department, working as a firefighter EMT. Had a few friends that got into it and was like, maybe that's the path I want to take. And then around that time, this was June, July of 2020. I was like, yeah, I'm going to start studying and applying for these structured firefighting jobs. I'll have to take the test, take the CPAT, which is the physical test, and then start doing all these interviews, hope maybe get my EMT certification and look into getting into firefighting and structured firefighting.
Right.
And then I eventually... one of the screws that they replaced and put into my right shoulder, and around this time in 2020, so a year and a half later from the surgery, was being rejected, similar to how it happened in my left shoulder.
Okay.
So it was pretty uncomfortable. I could feel something was going on in there. So I had a surgery to get it removed. Okay. At this point, I was like, well, I can't test for firefighting right now.
Right.
But the application process for all of these wildland firefighting crews for the next year of 2021 are starting to open in September, October of 2020.
Right.
So my friend from the Eniat Hotshots, his name's Sam, good guy. He's a smoke jumper out of Grangeville, Idaho now.
Okay.
He helped me through the hiring process. For whatever reason, it happens 8 months before the fire season happens or 6 months before the fire season happens, but that's just what happens when you work with the federal government.
Yeah.
They move a little slow.
Take a long time.
So I applied and was like, you know what? If this is meant to happen, if I'm supposed to be a wildland firefighter, maybe I'll get a job offer, maybe I won't. But either way, I'd like to go into firefighting, whether that's wildland firefighting with the Forest Service, or if that doesn't work out, my plan's still to try and study and apply to be a structured firefighter. Yeah. So I got a job working for Enterprise Rent-A-Car. around this time because I needed a job.
Yeah.
My job with the school district was done at that point. I needed something where I can make some money and then just work until I was a firefighter. Essentially, it was my plan. So I had surgery in September 2020, started coming here a couple months later.
Right.
Because I was like, hey, this is like the perfect place for me to like come out of a surgery and start preparing to be a firefighter.
Yeah.
Whether that's wildland firefighting or structured firefighting. And eventually got a call from the Forest Service. There was a crew out of Cle Elum, which just happened to be 30 minutes away from Ellensburg, where I went to school.
Right.
A couple other crews in Washington that called me. And at this point, I was like, you know what? I think Cle Elum's like where I want to go. So I took a job with Type 2 Initial Attack Hand Crew with the U.S. Forest Service based out of Cle Elum, Washington. And I think I got the job offer in like February of 2021. And it was exciting. Like, I don't know. I just felt like it was where I needed to be.
And a Type 2, you say it again, Type 2.
So it was a Type 2 Initial Attack Hand Crew.
And so what I know about Hotshots and firefighting of what you do is you have a pickaxe looking thing with hooks and all that, and you basically pull up trees and roots and make a line around the fire. Is that?
Yeah, that's a very basic understanding of it. You're not wrong.
I mean, that's the basic. I know there's a lot more to it, but basically you make it so that the fire gets quenched at some point.
Yeah. So
the line. Is that what a type? What would the Type 2 be?
A hotshot crew I wasn't on a hotshot crew back then. A hotshot crew is a Type 1 crew. So Type 1 or Type 2 designates like the number and type of qualifications that a crew has. So Type 1 means like they have a specific set of qualifications that allow them to do certain things.
Okay.
And those qualifications are the people on the crew. So like the leadership on the crew, the superintendent, the captains, the squad leaders, like they have a minimum number of qualifications in order to designate that crew as Type 1.
Okay.
So the Type 2 crew, they still have a lot of qualifications. It's just not enough to be designated as Type 1.
Okay.
So their capacity for things or what they're able to do is a little bit less than what like a Type 1 hotshot crew can do. So Type 2 is typical for like entry-level firefighters to get into because you're not Type 1. You don't need a lot of this experience.
Yeah.
You're not doing.
I mean, you're in fire, but the things you would do in a wildfire is different.
A little different. I think a lot of it is the same. Like what I did on that crew, hotshot crews do every day.
Yeah.
It's just the scale that I did it on was less. And then there's things that hotshot crews can do that we weren't doing.
Oh, okay.
So hotshot crews do what we did.
Yeah.
But we weren't doing everything.
The thing I read, and I took some time last night for about an hour and read about hotshot crews and the qualification. I think I mentioned to you, I almost clicked apply. I wouldn't because I'm not in that place in my life, but you get so inspired with it. But it's like the hotshot crews do this, but they just do it and clear and do stuff just a lot quicker. Yeah. So they're almost like the elite CrossFit athletes versus the regular member, or pretty good members. And you work into that, but you don't get to that point overnight. You have to work into it.
Typically, hotshots they have many years of experience. Even like the first year hotshots. I think now it might be a little different just because of the retention and recruitment issues that the Forest Service is having. They may be bringing in certain people to hotshot crews that don't have a ton of experience, and that's all right.
Yeah.
So the Type 2 Initial Attack Hand Crew that I was on was based out of Cle Elum. Initial Attack means like, in terms of like structured firefighting, it's very similar. Like you're waiting on call. If there's a fire locally, you guys are the initial attack on it. So you guys show up, respond to it, and try and suppress that fire as the initial attack resource. That is a hand crew.
Right.
Now, when there is a local fire, like there will be hand crews there. A hand crew is like a 20 to 25 person crew of people. They have trucks. They have all the little hand tools. Maybe some like hose packs of water or little like hose bags of water, but they're not attached to an engine that has water. They're not attached to any aircraft. It's like the resource is the hand crew.
Yeah.
So they're the people that you see that will have those, what you call like an axe or a pickaxe.
Yeah.
Those are called Pulaskis.
Oh, Pulaski.
Right. Which is named after Ed Pulaski, a very famous, notorious Forest Service employee.
Okay.
Back in like the 1900s, early 1900s, he was very crucial to the big burn of 1910. He saved his whole crew, paid his whole crew out of his own pocket because the Forest Service like wasn't really organized enough to pay the firefighters back then.
Okay.
So the tool, the Pulaski, it's got an axe end and then like a little hoe auger end on the other side. And then there's other hand tools, or we use chainsaws on hand crews.
Okay.
All that type of thing.
Sure.
So when there's a local fire, hand crews will, a lot of times, if they're available, respond. There's engines. There's all different size engines. So there's like a dually truck with a couple 100 gallons. There's more like what you'll see at a fire department locally. There's like some bigger fire engines.
Yeah.
All have different capabilities, all have different uses. And obviously, I'm sure we've all seen the aircraft that respond.
Yeah.
Small
air tankers. Dump the pink cloud.
Retardant. You'll have air tankers drop water, air tankers drop retardant. Those are the fixed wing planes. And then you'll have helicopters, which typically will have a bucket hanging from a long line. Yeah. Or they'll have a tank on the belly of the aircraft. Okay. You'll see usually buckets, but both happen. So the Type 2 initial attack hand crew, we were based out of Cle Elum. We'd respond to our district, the Cle Elum Ranger District, the Okanagan-Wenatchee National Forest, to local fires. Yeah. And then typically once a month, we'd get sent out on a more large campaign fire that needed like a hand crew resource. Right. So we weren't working on small local fires all the time. We were sent out to like larger fires. Okay. And working
to just assist in the process. Another hand crew.
Yeah, another hand crew. There. Like they needed like typically how it works is you'll get sent out for 2 weeks on a large campaign fire, and you'll be out there working every day for 14 days, sometimes 21. Okay. Usually it's 14 in my experience, and you'll be around a big group of people on this campaign fire. Okay. So my first year in fire. The campaign fires that we worked on, the ones that like lasted more than a couple days, the ones that were multiple weeks long, was the Schneider Springs fire out in Natchez, which was a pretty large fire. Okay. Natchez was just south of Cle Elum. And then the 25-mile fire out in the Lake Chelan area. We were on that one twice that year. Okay. Spent a couple weeks out there 2 times. And then the 30-mile fire down near like Walla Walla in the Blue Mountains. Okay. So we had a couple really good fire assignments that year. Yeah.
It's been, I mean, fires have always been, but I've noticed, maybe I'm more observant of it. There's been a lot in the recent years of fires, like big fires, up in Canada, but also in the Olympics over on the east side. Huge fires and stuff. So you started Type 2, and I'd be conscious. We were having an unbelievable conversation. I knew I wanted to get you once because,
we can keep going.
Of time and that. But
I got an hour.
So you did the Type 2, and then you went to Hotshots. Was that how much after? And what was the you were Type 2, then did you have to apply to be a Hotshot?
Yeah, so I actually haven't worked on a Hotshot crew yet. My first year on a Hotshot crew is this upcoming season. Okay.
So you did Type 2, and then were you in Cle Elum up until last season? And then
so I did my first 2 years, 2021 and 2022 in Cle Elum on that hand crew.
And then 2023?
2023, I moved out to Missoula.
That's right.
I was working on a helitack crew out of Missoula. So helitack crew is a little different. You have like hand crews, like I said, which is what I was on for the first 2 years. Right. A Hotshot crew is a hand crew. Okay. They're just more qualified, more experienced. Right. Usually are working on campaign fires exclusively. Okay. There are some exceptions to that. And then there's engine crews where, you staff, there's a handful of people that staff an engine. Okay. Anywhere from 3 to probably 5 or 6. Okay. And then there's helitack crews, which are groups of firefighters that support a helicopter in its fire suppression operations. Okay. So we went out to Missoula. I worked for Missoula Helitack. We had an old Vietnam era Huey that we were staffing, and then a more new, it was a Bell 407. So we had a Bell 205, which is a Huey. Right. If you know what that is. Yeah. And then a Bell 407, which is a much smaller aircraft. Right. So our Bell 407 stayed in Missoula all summer. Okay. And responded to local fires on the Lolo National Forest. Okay. Whether it was the Missoula Ranger District or Superior Ranger District, 9 Mile Ranger District, we were kind of like the aircraft that would respond to local fires. Okay. And that could be anything from like, hey, some firefighters with 9 Mile Ranger District just west of Missoula or up on this fire, they need an aircraft for bucket work. So we would fly out our helicopter to an area, set up the bucket under the helicopter, and then manage that helicopter while it put water onto the fire.
Okay.
We could also be sent out on our helicopter with a couple of us and go respond to like an incident that's much more remote that only a helicopter could get out to.
Okay.
So we would be staffing the helicopter and supporting that, or using the helicopter to drop us off and fight the fire ourselves. And then our 205, the larger helicopter, was sent around the country on campaign fires, or really we weren't on a campaign fire at all last year because it was a much quieter year in the lower 48 in terms of fire. So we were just sent down to areas of like high need.
Okay.
And we would basically just sit there and do very similar things to what our 407 in Missoula was doing. We just sit around and wait. And if something happened that they needed a helicopter for, we'd be able to respond to it. So those
so it was more just on call in a sense.
Yeah, in a sense. I think it was the nature of how the season was. It's weird that it wasn't attached to a large fire, in which case it's like working all day every day. It's a much different dynamic, like working from a hand crew to a helitack crew. Yeah. And then
now you're going to the Hotshot. So was there any process, like did you apply to be a Hotshot?
Yeah, so the process of applying to all these jobs happens through USA Jobs. It's like the federal government hiring website. Right. So no matter what you're applying for a Forest Service job or a Border Patrol job, a Department of Fish and Wildlife job, or a BLM, Bureau of Land Management job, like you're going to go to USA Jobs and apply there. So it's no different in terms of the application process. Okay. I think for me and for hotshot crews in general, it's definitely beneficial to like be a little bit more proactive in terms of your application process. So like, you need to apply. That's one step. Send in your application, bolster your resume, have good references. Like that is like the biggest thing is like you have solid references, because you can have the best resume, but if you're a list guy, or you have bad character, or you're just a bad person to have on the fire line, like your resume is not going to say that, whereas a reference will be able to confirm or deny how your character is. So for me, getting on a hotshot crew, I applied. Luckily, I applied to crews that I knew had good reputations. I knew people either on the crew, or I had connections to the crew via like coworkers or something that I'd worked with previously that could be a good reference for me. And then for me, the process was, one, it's kind of a two-way interview. So one, I was being interviewed by them to see if I'd be a good fit for their crew. But for me, like, I want to go to a crew that has solid leadership, that does things the way that I believe they should be done, that I can learn from, that has a solid reputation, that, fits kind of what I'm looking for. So it was kind of a two-way interview where they'd interviewed me, but also like I was in Missoula, interviewed with the crew in Missoula. I ended up driving down to Oregon, interviewed with the crew down there, and was just getting a feel for how they operate. And then I eventually ended up driving back to Montana to interview with two crews out there in Western Montana in November. So I went out there in November, interviewed. And I think for me, the process of like showing up, showing my face to the leadership of these crews who's doing hiring goes a really long way. But for me, just feeling like the vibe of the leadership of the crew, of the city, of the town, whatever it may be, that was huge for me in determining where I wanted to go. Because like I had an idea of like a crew that I wanted to go based solely on like a phone interview and like what I'd heard about them on paper. But when I went out to certain crews, it was like, man, I don't know if this will be a good fit for me. And there was a crew I like wasn't necessarily taking as serious, that I was like, man, that's like the top crew I want to go to. So I think for me, just feeling out the crews.
Well, it's like I mean, your experience, I would think, probably being a college athlete, it's like a similar idea. They may be recruiting you, but you have to take seriously your recruiting of them.
100%.
When it's one-sided and it's like you feel like, oh, I just want to go here. In experience now, I look back and it's the wrong way to approach it, because you not only do they want you need to make sure you want them, because you're going to be there every day. And I would especially think the more I read about hotshots, fire service in general, law enforcement, whatever, that crew, you're not just a part of a team, their lives are in your hands. Your life is in their hands, and you need to have, being former military, you never appreciate when you're young initially. You don't think necessarily in those terms, but as you get older, you realize, you know what? I need to know that I'm not with a list guy. I want to be not with list people because I may die through no fault of my own as a result.
Yeah.
And so that's really critical. And it shows maturity, you're young, but it shows maturity to realize that because of that aspect.
Yeah.
That this is going to be somebody, your work days are, what I've read, 16 hours, sometimes 29 straight.
Yeah.
Like you'll have some days you're on, 14 days straight, maybe a day off if something doesn't come up, and then you'll be on for 14 more.
Yeah.
So it's a constant, like you're on all the time. And so that community aspect is not just critical, it's life, it's life bearing.
Yeah, it could be the difference between life and death. And I think for me, going to a crew, I had two things that I was looking for: leadership and location. So for me, leadership is the number one thing I was looking for in terms of I have my own opinions on what I believe a quality leader is. A lot of them are formed based upon leaders that I've been around. I think my experience in athletics has shaped how I look at leadership and what I want out of a leader. And so the crews that I was looking at, I knew that their leadership was solid. But then when I went out to interview with them, it was like me kind of vetting that leadership even further. So that was the number one thing, because if you have good leadership, typically things will trickle down to the rest of the crew.
Yeah.
And I would much rather work for quality leadership than non-quality leadership.
Sure.
And then location was number two. I think for me, I want to be in an area that's in what is called Region 6. The Forest Service designates regions. Region 6 is Washington, Oregon. Region 1 is Montana. I applied for some other crews in different regions, but I kind of wanted to stay in Region 6 or Region 1 because I've been there before.
Yeah.
It's fairly close to home.
Yeah.
Within a day's drive.
Yeah.
So I kind of wanted to stay in a location that was in Region 1 or Region 6. Washington, Oregon, maybe Idaho, and then Montana as well. And I also applied for some rappel crews, which are there's like rappel crews and smoke jumpers. They're the ones that utilize aircraft for insertion on fires. So smoke jumpers obviously jump on planes,
right,
and then go fight really remote fires. And then there's helicopter rappellers who rappel out of the helicopters. I applied for a few crews in Idaho and Oregon for that as well.
Yeah.
But I really wanted to get on a hotshot cruise. So as far as location goes, region was like a thing that I was looking for, but then also the city. Like, if this is something that I end up deciding to do long term, I want to be in a town that I could see myself living. Yeah. So like Missoula was a place.
Yeah.
Helena was a place.
And Helena is where you're headed to.
Correct. Yeah.
For this upcoming season. And when does the season start?
So my first day is April 22nd. I'll head out the week before that.
Okay. So it's coming up, and the season runs April to October. Or depends.
October, November, it's just highly dependent on how the summer goes, what the fall looks like.
Okay.
Historically, in my last 3 seasons, I've been done in early to mid-October, but depending on the crew and what's going on, you could be out there till November.
Yeah.
It kind of depends.
Yeah. And I was kind of flipping through here. I'm listening, but I'm also flipping through and realizing that we were going to talk about fire service, but we nipped a lot of the questions that I was going to ask you. What are you looking forward to about this upcoming season?
Yeah, that's good. I'm looking forward to getting back out to Montana. I'm a big fan of it out here in the Pacific Northwest, and I think long-term for the majority of my life, I'd like to be here in Bellingham, Whatcom County, Western Washington, just in general. But I am excited to spend another summer out in Western Montana. Now, with Hotshot Cruise, I'm not sure how much I'll actually be in Western Montana, just given the amount of traveling we might be doing. But just being back out there, kind of being on my own, I'm looking forward to that. Yeah. One thing that I've come to really like and appreciate is how simple life becomes during the fire season. So I don't really have anything else going on. I don't have a family, I don't have kids. I'm just out there working. Yeah. And my life gets condensed to what I can fit in my car. Yeah. And this year I'll actually be living out of my car when I'm in Helena. So it's going to be even more simple because it's going to be what I can fit that I can also sleep around. Life becomes pretty simple. It's just you're out in the woods, you're fighting fire, you're eating food, you're drinking water, and you're trying not to get hurt. And it
brings me actually to one of the things I had for a later question. But one of the things you started doing, I don't remember exactly when, but you started journaling. So you get a lot of chances to journal and that. which, if I recall, started out as a few sentences, maybe here and there. So it'll give you a chance to journal more. How has journaling helped you?
Yeah, so I started journaling, was going through some stuff after my surgery, some other personal stuff, and I don't know, I just felt like I needed to write some stuff down. And I've journaled a little bit, not anything serious, not anything consistent. And I don't know, I'm very, like, I like being neat, I like being tidy, I like being organized, like me journaling with pen and paper, like it's just, I don't know, it's kind of like a cool, like, aesthetic, I guess you could say, but also, like, I knew I would get something out of it if I stayed consistent with this. So my goal was to, like, I got a notebook, I got a nice pen like you got here, the old Pilot G2, best pen ever. And I just was like, I'm going to write every day. I don't care if it's one sentence. I don't care if it's 10 pages. It's just every single day I'm going to write something. And just whatever happens, happens. For 30 days, that was my goal. So I eventually did it. And, like, I've been doing it since for a year and a half now. Pretty much every day. I've missed a few days here and there. Obviously, life comes up. But as far as the consistency goes, like, that's... I've gotten a ton out of it. It's kind of...
Well, and like you mentioned, I think I saw it on one of your posts, you get a chance to go back. So I'm a journaler. I've done both computer-based, but I'm a pen-to-paper person. And, you get a chance to go back and look. I mean, you have your posts on Instagram you could refer back to. There's nothing... A pen and paper, what I had learned long ago, was always available. You can always take a little pad of paper with you, scraps of paper, whatever. And I have notebooks that are filled with scraps of paper that I basically pasted in later, because it basically gave me a chance to dump. It's as much it's reflection, it's whatever, but there's points where you don't have anybody to decompress with or whatever. So you just journal it out. And then you can feel like, okay, at least it's been heard. Or it's been put down.
For me, it's a form of therapy. That's at the end of the day, it's a form of therapy. It's somewhere I can go. Even when I talk to people and I'm able to talk through something or talk to somebody about something, like, I feel like there's, in a way, something holding me back from being, like, 100% open, honest, vulnerable, no ego, no nothing, like, except my journal. I can go write anything in there. The only person that hopefully will ever read it is me, and I don't want anyone else to read it. And, like, that's where I can go literally say exactly what I'm thinking. And it feels good.
And there's times I will just share with you. There have been times I've gone back and I have lightly put X's through pages where it was like, okay, we're done with that. It doesn't, I want to make it go away. I'm just not going to live in it. So I'll put a light X through it and be like, okay, when I go back to this journal, or if somebody saw this journal, they're going to see what I was thinking, or my feelings, or my heart. But the X for me signifies, okay, we moved on. A lot of it's just life stuff. A lot of it's reflection. But it's one of those things where we need the therapy of communication with people, but being in your own thoughts sometimes is better than what the rawness of what you would share with somebody initially.
For sure.
And it gives you a chance to reflect on it and maybe edit it in your own brain of how you want to deal with whatever it is, whatever situation. But when I saw that, I thought, I have to talk about journaling, because it's one of those things where there are times where I go months that I haven't journaled, but I always come back to it. I always refer back to it. It's awesome. That's great. And you had, I know you shouted out somebody in your 30-day, I don't know if you remember, there was somebody you added. There was like a guy, I can't remember who it was, but and it was the same thing, but it was like a reference. So, but and people who want to, they can go back and, if you're okay when they accept, you can accept their friend request. You can stalk and read about what I'm talking about. So that's very cool. So one of the other things that struck, so we're pretty much done with fire service. We're going to talk a little bit about ultra running, and then we're going to be done. We've been going for an hour and 30 minutes, and it's a lot of this is not going to get edited out. It's going to have to be maybe my first 3-parter, because we'll see. Maybe I'll see how I go with. You had mentioned to me you have at least 1, maybe 2 tattoos that are meaningful to you. Remind me again. Are they both verses, or one's a verse?
I have a piece on my chest on my left pec, it's Jeremiah 29:11.
Okay.
Which, if you don't know, is a verse in the Bible. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper and not harm you, plans to give you hope in the future.
Yeah.
I think with a lot of my injuries, like, I kept going back to that verse, and I'm a big believer that God, the universe, whatever you want to believe in, for me, it's God, has a plan for my life. And that verse has always given me peace in times of confusion or me wondering why I'm injured again or whatever it may be. I think at that point it had to do it had to do with my injuries and just understanding that, like, it's out of my hands and that there's a plan for my life. And if I choose to believe that, it'll get better.
Yeah.
I can choose to be a victim of that situation, but, like, I choose to not be. I choose to believe that, like, hey, this is going to work out how it's supposed to.
Yeah.
And I think it's just, even if it doesn't, at least in that time, you can have some peace and hope for the future.
Yeah.
The next one I got is Romans 8:18, which once again has to do with having faith. It's, for I consider the sufferings of the present time are not worth comparing to the glory that will be revealed to you.
Yeah.
So similar in a way to the Jeremiah 29:11. I think it just, for me, once again, through injuries, that verse has helped me a lot in terms of just like, hey, you might be suffering now, but, like, stay the path, keep having faith. Like, it's all going to work out according to the plan. It's all going to work out how it's supposed to.
Yeah.
And then I eventually got, like, a half sleeve finished, kind of around the Romans 8:18 verse, which is on the inside of my arm.
Yeah.
And the half sleeve is a set of praying hands, which once again has to do with having faith.
Yeah.
Above the praying hands are some sun rays. Around the praying hands are, like, some storm clouds and lightning strikes. And then I have 3 doves, which symbolize myself and my 2 brothers.
Yeah.
And I think the whole vision for that tattoo is, like, if you have faith and you lean on your family, it'll get you through the storms of life.
Yeah.
So I believe in that. Like,
yeah, absolutely.
If you have faith, if you have the right mindset, if you lean on the community of people around you, like my family or like the people here at this gym or whatever community you have, like, that'll get you through whatever it is you're going through. It's so much better than isolation and just being angry and playing the victim. I think it's important to take ownership and to believe that it's going to get better and to lean on those around you.
Yeah. That's so cool. Yep. I mean, I won't go into it here. You can listen to my own individual podcasts. So I have one coming up on grief. So Jeremiah 29:11 was one of the verses my mom and stepdad put in a Bible before I left for boot camp in 1987. And given my life and loss of my dad, a brother, since then, a mom, a son, you know, you can get crushed by life, or you can, you know, and in faith and my belief and trust in God that everything happens for a reason. We don't see it. We don't want it. But when I look back, I realize, you know, I wish it could have been different, but I'm thankful for where I am today for it's brought me to there.
Exactly.
And I think that's, if we can think in those terms, not a victim, but just living our life the best we can in the way we think, but accepting that life is messy, it's hard, it's loss, it's lots of joy. But if we can accept the journey and the path and those bumps and the process of that and not be angry, prideful, you know, and so on, but just living our life the best we can at that moment and being a good person, not being a list person in life is critical. And, you know, my own journey. So one of the things I did also note is books. You're a reader. You read 30 books last year, is what I understand.
Yeah, I think it was 30.
30 books, you said.
Yeah.
So I know from your profile that Marcus Aurelius' Meditations is your favorite.
Yeah,
it's a good book. Besides that, and I can tell by your personality, I mean, it's one of those, you know, stoic lifestyle. Sometimes being stoic seems so hard, and, you know, it's not just allowing life, you move forward in life, but you don't allow life to crush you. You just continue on the path, on that process. What other books, any other books from last year that stick out as favorites? And a follow-up you can think about is, what are some things you've taken from one or two or three of those?
Yeah. Yeah, I think Meditations is a solid book for sure. What I like about it is Marcus Aurelius, Roman emperor, Stoic philosopher. He was like the most powerful man in the world at the time, where that book is like his journal that's been published.
Right.
So it was never meant for publication. It was meant for his own sake. Similar to how we were talking about journaling. Like,
yeah.
I really hope my journals don't get published, or if they do, hopefully they can help people. Like Meditations has helped people
inspire.
Yeah, I just think it's fascinating, like where his mindset was during his time of power.
Yeah,
he easily could have been corrupted by that, but you see in his journals, Meditations, like he was looking to get better. He was looking to monitor himself and his power. He was looking to be that stoic philosopher amidst his power, which like I think is very rare.
Yeah.
So that's why I like it.
Yeah. You never, and I've read it. I've read a couple different, his original and iterations people have had with some commentary. Power corrupts, or power can corrupt, and it's a case where he's in this battle through it with himself, to not be corrupted.
Yeah, it's so relatable too. Like just some of the things he talks about that he's struggling through is like, we struggle with that as humans still to this day.
Right.
So I think that's really cool.
Okay.
A couple other books I read last year. I'm really big into like history books, especially like U.S. history. So one of my favorites last year was Empire of the Summer Moon, which talks about the Comanche Empire down in like the Texas, Oklahoma area. I just think it's fascinating kind of how they came to be, and then kind of their battle with Western settlers down in the Texas area.
Okay.
Trying to think. There's a good book about the Big Burn of 1910, which I think is super interesting considering my career path, but also just in general. The Big Burn of 1910 was a 2 million acre fire that burned basically from like Missoula to Spokane and then north and south of there. But the first half of that book talks about Teddy Roosevelt, Gifford Pinchot, and kind of their relationship and how they came to form the Forest Service. And then the second half of the book talks more about the history of the Big Burn, which is where Ed Pulaski's talked about in there. And it's just fascinating.
Yeah.
It's so fascinating. Like over 100 years ago, an incident that happened has shaped how the Forest Service goes about suppressing fires even to this day. Some of it good, some of it not so great, in my opinion, in terms of how fires now affect the landscape. But just a good book. So I just like I like those.
So are you on track for 30 this year?
We'll see. It depends how the summer goes. I feel like I had a good amount of time.
I don't want to stress you out, but we're gonna follow. I'm gonna follow your Instagram and look for some posts. I committed to one book read. It didn't have to be a size. Sometimes I get myself into, reading James Michener 1,000-page books, and there's no way I can do that in a month. But I committed to one book read and one audio book per month. So I'm on track so far through March. We'll see. Same thing. I have that discipline to make sure I do it. But I'll be excited to see how your process goes with it. So
it's fun to learn.
That's cool.
I like learning,
and cool.
Also enjoy like fiction books where you can kind of get lost in a story that's made up. It's also cool.
Favorite fiction book?
Ooh,
or favorite 2 or 3?
I don't know. I'm a Harry Potter guy.
Yeah, okay.
I like the Harry Potter.
Yeah,
books.
Cool.
I grew up reading those. Them. I could read those all the time.
Yeah. I grew up with brothers who read fantasy. It took me 30 years or 25 years to read The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings because I'm a action, mystery, and thriller guy, not a fantasy. But Harry Potter, the same thing. It took me 2 years after they came out and I'm contrarian. So if it's popular, I'm not going to probably do it. So, which is both good and bad. But that's very cool. Very cool. Actually, it's funny. We're winding down. We're 144 in. We're winding down, but we still got to talk about ultra running. Let's kind of go through ultra running as much as you would like to. And we can kind of button this up then for you. And I've enjoyed it. I've really had a good time chatting, learning, and hopefully we can condense this because we may not get you again till November or December or whenever.
That's
so
fine. You can just get an update on how life's going.
Yeah. So, okay. So we're going to continue on here. and talk about ultra running. So, and running in general. So you always had kind of been a runner, I'm sure, through athletics and the need for it. But when did the desire to do longer running, ultra running, 20, 30, 50-mile races kind of take hold?
Yeah, I started running when I lived out in Minnesota in 2019. At that time, I was kind of looking for something that could replace what football had given me in terms of like needing to work towards something physical, kind of escaping the rest of your life into like a physical pursuit. And I think the gym had always kind of done that for me, but I was looking for something a little bit more. And I came across like a rabbit hole of videos on YouTube of like these 200, 240 mile like ultra races. And I was just fascinated by it. I was like, how, like I couldn't even imagine having ran a half marathon at that point. There's people running 200 some miles, and you know, there's videos on YouTube of like Courtney DeWalter, who's like one of the greatest ultra runners of all time, not just a female ultra runner, but just in general, like one of the greatest to ever do it.
Right.
And then there's guys like Wes Plate on YouTube who just like document these 240 mile, like 5-day adventures. And I think I came across a David Goggins video on, I think at that point he had just been on the Rogan podcast, and I had listened to him and I was like, who is this guy? Like, this guy, I don't know.
Running through the deserts.
Yeah, I was just like, I heard about Badwater 35 and Western States 100, like all these races that I didn't even know existed. And so I was like, I don't know, like maybe, I think I listened to some clip from Goggins on Rogan, and I was like, I'm gonna go for a run after work today. So I like went in my running shoes or my lifting shoes and ran 2 miles on the treadmill, and I was like, all right, like that sucked, but I'm getting a pair of running shoes and I'm gonna train for a half marathon. Like I feel like I don't know, I just felt called to run and train for a half marathon. So I like really got into it, and like I started to become obsessed. Like was watching running videos on YouTube as often as I could, and was doing all this research on like how to become a better runner, how to get into running. I was like had some programming to help me prepare for my first half marathon, which took me a couple months to train for. And I eventually did run my first half marathon, which like looking back is crazy that a half marathon was for me like a huge deal, because now I can like go run 13 miles.
No big deal. It strikes me because you have common people. So Erica and JT Thompson were on. They're obsessed with ultra running, if you will. They just did the Chuck and Nut. And so you have people there. You have Art. You know, just did what was it, Moab 240 or whatever. It's like
he's gonna be running Cocodona 250 in
next month. Y'all have this whole mini community of crazy people in my mind. Because I did a half marathon, and the only reason I survived it was along the coast of Santa Barbara in 65-degree weather. And I could walk, run with a million other people. Nobody knew who I was, and I could look at the seals, and I was distracted. To go out and run just for the sake of running 13 miles, to me, there's nothing good unless there's like steak along the way.
You're missing out.
I know. I'm trying to be inspired by your running stories, but so you have that community. But so you did your first half marathon. When did you? So your longest race, didn't you just do 50 miles or?
So this January I ran a 50-mile race down on Catalina Island. So, I ran my first half marathon in 2019. Then I really then football season happened where I was coaching. Wasn't really running as much as I wish I could have. But then as soon as the football season was done, I'm like, I'm training for a marathon. Like I want to do it. So then when I moved back here to Washington, like I was like all in training for a marathon, and then COVID hit. Canceled all the marathons, but it was a good opportunity for me to still go run.
So
I was just running. And I had a marathon planned for like late May or early June of 2020. My marathon got canceled. So I continued my training plan. I decided to run the 4x4x48 challenge that weekend instead of running the marathon.
And what is the 4x4?
It's 4 miles. You run 4 miles every 4 hours for 48 hours. So you run 48 miles in 48 hours, and you're running at midnight and 4 a.m., 8 a.m., noon, and so I did that. And then eventually my goal was to work up into running ultra marathons, because that's what an ultra marathon is, anything longer than a regular 26.2 mile marathon. And so one of the blessings of working in in Cle Elum was, it's pretty common for wildland firefighters to run for like your physical training for the day.
Yeah.
But also like there's a lot of ultra runners that join or are within the Forest Service. Like kind of takes a crazy person to do both jobs or do that job and to run an ultra marathon. So it kind of attracts like people like me, I guess you could say. Met a couple people there. My good friend Preston, who is still my good friend, a good running partner now, who had run several ultra marathons at that point. So I was like, sweet, like now I know a guy who's done it before. Like I can learn from him. And we decided that to sign up for a 50K in 2022. In March 2022, chucking up 50K.
Yeah.
So trained for that, ran that in 2022. And I guess my goal this whole time, since I came across those videos in 2019, is to like work up into 100-mile races. And eventually I'd like to run a 200-mile race.
Yeah.
Whether it's Moab 240 or the Bigfoot 200 here in Washington. Or, there's another one in Tahoe, the Tahoe 200.
Yeah.
The Cocodona 250. There's all kinds of long distance.
It's really gotten popular. Of course, again, it's what your focus is. I only know about like the Moab 200s because Art doing it, or Eric and JT, or now with you doing it. It's not in my wheelhouse at this point, but it's interesting to me. And every time I think, okay, I'm not probably going to do 200, but I can at least go out and run a 10K.
Yeah.
So I'm inspired to get back into doing that.
Yeah.
I just don't know that I have the mental. Well, I could do it. I could do it.
You have it.
I could do
it takes time. Like when I first started running in 2019, I was a college athlete, just outdone.
Yeah.
And running 1 or 2 miles was really challenging.
Yeah.
But also, I didn't know about like, hey, most of your runs should be easy. So like, you should run at a conversational pace. It was like, oh, I got 2 miles. Like I'm going to run that as fast as I can.
You're competitive.
By the time I was halfway done, I was like completely gassed. So that's part of the process of learning.
Full send.
Yeah.
Full send 2-miler.
That's not what you want every time you run.
Yeah.
You want to do 90% of them easy, and then maybe one a week, like start push it or have some type of structured speed workout that you're doing. But running, it's been one of the
another thing like journaling that you picked up on, and it's something that you have now for your life.
Yeah.
The community of people that you've picked up with and so on. So you ran 1,200 miles about 1,200 miles last year. You were on track to.
Last year I ended up running over 1,400.
Okay.
I was on track for 12, but I really picked it up in the preparation for my 50-miler in January. Yeah. So near the end of the year, I was big miles.
Wow.
Yeah.
And somebody asked, I did notice, so I read a few comments, how many miles? And most of them were like 5 to 10 mile runs, 5 to 7.
I think so.
But it's just consistency every day.
So like for this summer, for example, like I had the opportunity to go run pretty much every day. And so every day I was running 5-6 miles. But then in preparation for like a longer race, like 50-mile race, like my plan, I'd say on a day-to-day run, not including my long run, which usually happens on the weekends, that's anywhere from like 15 to 25 miles. Yeah. Every day was anywhere from like 6 to 10 miles would be like an average day.
But the key is consistency. You don't get 1,400 miles, in a month.
Yeah.
You do it just little bites. Yeah. So what do you think you're on track for now?
I have no idea. I think I'm over 400 miles at this point this year, from January 1st until now.
Okay.
Which is March 23rd right now. So I'm in over 400 miles right now.
So you're
it depends how much I can run this summer with work.
With Hotshots.
I guess my goal, I've ran 1,000 miles every year since 2020, ran 1,000, 2021. Every year since then, it's like been over 1,000, anywhere from 1,000 to like 1,450.
That's so cool. That's so cool.
If I can get over 1,000 again, that's kind of my goal. But.
So I got probably 4 more questions for you, and then we'll be done here. What do you love about running?
Ooh, I could talk about this for hours. What I love about it is
which I can record, but I don't think we have that time.
It's just an escape. Like I love the runner's high you get. I love the feeling of coming out of a run and like man, that I feel like I wasn't doing anything. Like it just goes by quick, and that doesn't always happen, but I've been finding a lot of my runs the last year or two, like I'm getting into that runner's high, that flow state every time, and it's like an addicting feeling.
Yeah.
I like the challenge that it presents. Most days I don't want to go run. I don't want to step out the door, but like if you don't want to come to the gym and you do it, you end up feeling better afterwards.
Yeah.
And I like that. And then especially recently, I've been running without headphones, but even with headphones, like if you're listening to music or a podcast, it's pretty easy to just like zone out and think clearly about whatever it is you're going through. So journaling, like you're writing stuff down, pen and paper or your computer, whatever it might be. When it's running, it's like, no, you have time to like process through things. And I've been running a lot without headphones lately. And it's just, I think like the most clearly while simultaneously like not thinking at all. It's weird. It's hard to explain, but it's that flow state I'm talking about.
Well, you don't get in your, I think that's the hardest part. And that's where I think therapy and going to counseling. And I am a big advocate. I wasn't anti, I just didn't know it.
Yeah.
So many things in my younger life, I wish I had gotten counseling ahead of time or known about, because I was so blocked and it was accumulated junk. And if you aren't able to release it through journaling, through running, through activity, whatever, healthy things, not unhealthy ways, it just accumulates, but it will be dumped at some point. And for me, it was 36 years old is when all that came out. All that. And I think if you can find that therapy, that processing, get the help from someone else when you need it, but that ability to have those tools to do that is so critical for the rest of your life. And those that you come in contact with that will see that same thing. Is so critical. So
I think also with running, like I'm very goal oriented, very type A, motivated, and it gives me something. It gives me structure. It gives me something to work towards, because like whether it's me training for work or me training for a race or whatever it may be. Like I like having that structure and having that physical outlet that is helping me work towards something. Like in football, it was you're training for the season, you're training for the game, you're practicing for the game.
Ultimately, the prize of the state title for you, it's cumulative for you, because it applies to your own healthy self, but also it's certainly something that's going to benefit you as a hotshot, as a firefighter, definitely. As a and a person in general. So that's so cool. So we already talked actually about that.
Yeah, and I think also I have an addictive personality, and so I think it's good for me to direct my addictive personality towards something that's fairly productive. And I don't know if the amount I run is actually healthy. It might. Some people could argue it's probably unhealthy, but for me, I get so much out of it that it
would only be unhealthy if you're leaving behind the necessary things you need to be doing. If you're not attached, you've got no, as far as I know, or whatever. This is a good thing for you. It's at this point in life, if you were to obsess over running where you leave behind the good things of your life, or you forego a relationship because this becomes too much, or that's every individual has to decide that. But no, I mean, strikes me as being an addictive personality. It's not. It's just a good, healthy thing. It's got a goal. Yeah. It's not taking over your life. It's just a piece of it. So that's very cool. Okay, so. Last question. I'm going to skip that one because we covered it. If a young person came to you for advice, and I'm going to say life advice, and it's your choice, 1, 2, 3, whatever. Let's keep it at 3. Or just in general, what would you say to them? Like you have 5 minutes with this person, and you can choose to take 5 minutes to say it, or you can generalize. But what are the things you would tell them with where you are today?
I think number 1 is you need to work hard, and then you need to work harder than you think you need to work. I think that applies to anything. Most of us have goals. Most of us have dreams, aspirations, and there's a lot of things that can happen that can derail us from those. But I think if you work hard and apply yourself and work even harder than you think, whether that's you want to play college football, you want to go to the NFL, you want to run a race, you want to open a business, you want to qualify for the CrossFit games, whatever it is, like you need to work hard, and then you need to realize that in order to succeed, you need to keep working hard, harder than you think.
Yeah.
Number 2, I think, has to do with taking ownership for yourself and not expecting people or the world to owe you anything. So don't be a victim to your circumstances or to people around you and expect that they're going to give you what you think you deserve. Like, you need to take ownership for yourself, for your life, for the things that happen to you, whether or not they're in or out of your control, and find what you can do to make a situation better, or find what you can do to move forward, or whatever it is. I think you said it, but life is inherently suffering. I believe that. And not to be like negative and pessimistic, but I just think that's the realistic view of the world. You know, like bad things happen to good people, bad things happen to bad people. But if you take ownership for yourself, for how you respond to those things, and you don't expect that the world's going to give you something good because of whatever it is, like, I think that's super important to understand. I think that's helped me pretty much more than anything, is just realizing, like, hey, I need to take ownership for myself. The third thing, I struggle with this a lot given my personality, but it's to not take life or yourself too seriously. Like I said, I'm type A, very motivated, very serious, because I want to do good things. I want to succeed in the things that I set out to succeed at. And I oftentimes find myself being too serious and taking things and people and whatever it is too seriously. And I'm not having enough fun with it. That's something that I'm aware of. And so I feel like I'm taking a lot more steps to not be so serious and not to have more fun with things. And I think there's value in being like how I am, who I am.
Yeah.
Because it's been the reason for, I think, a lot of the successes that I've had in life. And there's definitely value in that, but also it's the reason for a lot of angst. So I think if you don't take life too seriously all the time, have some fun with things, and it'll save you some stress and anxiety down the line.
Yeah, I think I would sum it up, and that's great advice. And I think if those who are listening, if I could go back as a young person and realize those three things, that, and I say life is suffering, and some people look at it and say I'm negative. I'm not. If you know anything about me, personality-wise, I'm not serious, and probably not serious because I face so much seriousness in my life that I can be sometimes on the other side. I'm not serious enough at the appropriate time. But again, that comes from having to face so many losses, so many sufferings, that when it's time to suffer, I'm willing to suffer. But there's times where we look to make or create some suffering, whether it's for ourselves or for others. And I think that's the other aspect, is our seriousness, our demands, our life journey may create suffering for others, in which case is it really good? And so that's kind of, as I think back what you said, it's really applicable, really appropriate, and really good. And I may even cut everything I'm saying right now because it's a good ending, but it's advice that now you at 20,
I'm 27,
that if I'd known, I knew it, just didn't live it, didn't see it.
Yeah.
So if you're under 27, but even if you're not, if you're older like me, it's good advice, good thoughts for all of us to apply. Yeah. And so I am so appreciative. We have hit over 2 hours of conversation. I don't know that it'll all make it in the podcast, but I feel like it pretty much started a few minutes ago. Yeah, I enjoyed the conversation. I'm hoping to get you on later in the year when the fire season is over. Thoughts, good prayers. Obviously we'll follow. I'll post links to the ultrarunning, to your Instagram, to the Helena Hotshots stuff that people can follow. Your other things. Just really, really a pleasure to spend time with you today, and enjoyed the conversation. Hopefully you learned a lot about Lucas, and there are things we talked about that are applicable for you to learn, or maybe are appropriate for you, you'll take with you and apply to your own life. So thank you again for spending the time. Enjoy your last few weeks here, and then again, great thoughts and prayers as you go forward with Helena Hotshots. So thank you again. Have a great day, everybody, and we will talk to you soon. And there you have it, everyone. I hope you really, really enjoyed listening to our conversation. And I, again, am so thankful for Lucas spending the better part of 2 hours a couple Saturdays ago just chatting about his life from the time he was a very young athlete coming into CrossFit, and CrossFit I Love It, as a high schooler, to the grown man firefighter, ultrarunner, and just really wonderful person that he is. It was a pleasure to talk with him and share with you that conversation. So he is off to start his firefighting summer here in just a few days. This will be episode will be coming out on April 17th. He begins on April 22nd. So follow his Instagram for kind of his journey. You can also follow just any of the other posts we talked about previously. As he said in the interview, you're welcome to stalk his Instagram, give him a follow, and really enjoy that process. I will post links to the Lynden Hotshots so that you can see kind of more information about that if that's something that interests you. Also, just a link to a firefighting, wilderness kind of firefighting of what Lucas will be doing. I'll link to that also. And also just some of the ultra running we were talking about. Again, real pleasure to chat with him. As I think about this, as this is being released, tomorrow is the release of the CrossFit individual quarterfinal workouts. We have quite a few members from CrossFit I Love It who have qualified as individuals and in the age group areas. So really special thoughts for each of them. And I won't name them all here, but good luck to each of them in the team division, the masters division, and the individuals. Really excited to cheer them on, and good luck to everyone who will be competing. Outside of that, I will be having some episodes coming up that's just me talking. I had mentioned in the previous interview and even in this one that I'll be talking about grief. It has been a little over 1 year since my son Micah passed away suddenly. And so I'm going to do a 1 year later episode from when I had talked about that just a few weeks after he had passed away. So that'll be coming up. I'll have some other episodes on just various topics that I think are applicable. Hopefully you'll find them useful and will be things that you can incorporate perhaps in your own personal life. There's not much more to say. I hope you have a great day. I hope this is finding you healthy, happy, and excited about the opportunities that are afforded to you this very day that you're listening to this episode. As I always end, please be kind to yourself, be kind to others. When you have a chance, and at all times that you have a chance, be of service to those around you, your family, friends, and your community. I always am appreciative of those who like the video. If you could, please share this with your friends. Ask them to subscribe. If you could subscribe also. Also, go back. A number of people are new to this podcast. Go back and listen to the previous interviews with Carissa Stapp, Jason Marlowe, JT and Erica Thompson, Matt and Kaylee Lovelady, and this episode you just have listened to with Lucas Petersen. I'm excited about some other guests that will be coming up. I won't tell you who they are, but there's a lot of great stories coming down the line. If you could give a like, subscribe, share this with your friends, ask them to check it out also. I'm really happy to bring really great people, and it's a pleasure for me to have a chance to interview them, to learn about them myself, but also to share them with you, the listener. That's it for now, and I wish you all the best, and I will talk to you very, very soon. Take care, everybody.